youth program. This is a series of webinars which Bharat Scouts and Guides is organizing with the support of Asia Pacific Support Center and the Global Office at KL. And this is a series of webinars which will build the competencies in the members of Bharat Scouts and Guides. And this will also help us to connect to the membership growth project what we are having currently, which is progressing. And the inputs from this session will help you to write your objectives and action points on the youth program, which will contribute towards the growth of membership in the country. Now, let me ask our Executive Director, Mr. Krishnaswamy R., who is in charge of the membership growth, to welcome our resource speakers and guests. Swamy, sir.
Good evening to all. It's a pleasure to once again meet all our panelists and honored consultants of the WOSM. Today, in addition to our permanent consultant, Mr. Param Palani, who is helping us since the first workshop of 12th June on membership growth, we are now joined by a long-standing leader trainer from the Boy Scouts Association of the Scout Association of Singapore. This is a privilege to welcome the staff of Asia Pacific region in charge of educational methods, Brother Sid Castillo, in this webinar. Our resource person for today, he rose from the level of the district commissioner to the level of the member of the Asia Pacific Program Committee, who also had the privilege of the chair of the Asia Pacific Program Committee. And now Mr. Lau has decided to help us in giving us inputs on the youth program and how it helps us to draft our membership growth plans. He is also joined by Yang Chen, another good friend of Scouting in Singapore. So we welcome you to the sessions. On behalf of the Chief Commissioner of the Bharat Scouts and Guides, Dr. Khandelwal, and the Director Bharat Scouts and Guides, Mr. Arthur Kaushik, we welcome you and we present this webinar to the members of the Membership Growth Committee, trainers, and state level office bearers of Bharat Scouts and Guides. Welcome, sir.
And nice to see Mr. Mohanty. Welcome, Mr. Mohanty.
Thank you very much.
Now, I request Sid to begin the proceedings. Sid, if you have initial remarks, and then we can start with Eric. Sid bhai?
Yes, Madhu.
You have any initial remarks before Eric begins?
Not really. I just came here just to say hello. Please proceed, Madhu. Thank you.
Thank you, Sid. And Eric, over to you for the session. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Yeah, hi, this is Eric. Okay, I'll give a brief introduction of myself in a short while, but right now what I will do is to switch the screen or to share the screen with for the slides, right? Okay, so I'll do that right now. Okay. So can you guys see the slides?
Yes, please.
Okay, great. So you can see the slides. Okay, so this is, thank you for having me to share what the little I know about youth program, as well as how youth program enable membership growth. right? So I have termed today's topic to be youth program and growth, right? Because I think we are not just trying to find out more about youth program per se, we are also wanting to have growth in mind, okay? So I was given 3 difficult questions to answer today, right? So let's see what are the questions that's being given to me to share. First is, what is youth program, right? So I will cover that. I understand that amongst us, we have many experienced scout leaders. So I'll take everyone through in the context of the World Scout Youth Program policy, right? And, so that we can have a common understanding of what is youth program. The second question I was given is how to effectively implement the program to ensure membership retention as well as attracting young people, right? And then the third question is, how important is this ingredient contributing to growth? Okay, so I'll be answering all these questions. I've placed them into 3 segments. The first segment is on the World Scout Youth Program policy, right? And then the next 2 segments, not necessarily mapping to question 2 and 3, but I'll be making use of the growth toolkit. It was recently published, right? As recent as December 2019, right? So it's quite recent, to share some insights from that publication, right? So that will help us answer question 2 and 3, right? So this is the scope for today. This is what we're going to cover, right? So, right. So this is me. Okay, just a very quick introduction about myself. Currently, I'm one of the WOSM consultant, right? And I'm serving in the youth program as well as youth engagement services, right? I also facilitate GSETs, right? The other volunteer job with WOSM is being a member of the REP Macro Review Committee, right? So those of us who are familiar with REP, which is the Renewed Approach to Program, is a document to help us craft or renew our youth program with this framework, right? So that tool has been out for almost 20 years, right? So it's time for a renewal, and I'm sitting in that committee, right? So some of my adventures, my scouting adventures, right? Recently, I was a member of the planning and delivery team for the World Non-Formal Education Forum, which was in Rio de Janeiro, right? So that was held in December last year, right? I was also a member of the APR subcommittee for over 6 years, 2 triennium, and in the second triennium, I was the vice chair, right? Concurrently, during that time, I was the National Program Commissioner for Singapore, right? So that's just a very quick, brief background about myself. Okay. So the first question to answer is, what is youth program, right? To understand youth program, we have to look in the context of the World Scout Youth Program policy, right? So do you know how many policies, how many versions of the World Scout Youth Program policies are there, right? Maybe not to get you to guess, but the first ever policy, right, inverted comma, was really in scouting for boys, right? That was published in 1908 after the Brownsea Island experimental camp, and over the next 15 years, right, from 1908 onwards, BP actually refined that document quite a bit, right? And then things actually stayed on for a while until 1990, during the 32nd World Scout Conference in Paris. We have the first actual world program policy, right? Some of the things that is worthy to note, that is not to say that during 1908 and 1990, things actually stand still. There were refinement along the way, right? But very much the structure of youth program stays the same, right? What was constant was at that time, the program was perceived as a set of fixed activity, which was described in Scouting for Boys. So everybody will be doing the same program, the same structure, right? There was no customization, there's no tailoring, unlike what we have today. So, but we must appreciate at the time, there wasn't this concept about, there was mass manufacturing at that time. So people are aware that you can do something, repeat over and over again, but people are still not familiar with customization or tailoring at that time, unlike what we have today. So that was something wasn't quite discovered at that time, right? So in 1990 or over the years, there has been a lot of discussion about how the youth program could be better, right? And finally, after a lot of discussions over the years, the first version of the youth program in 1990 was published, right? So the big difference there was this version of world policy was known, or one of the main thrusts of the policy is to have the youth program adapted to the needs and aspiration of young people for each generation in each country, right? There wasn't any illusion that the program in 1908, what BP has experimented in Brown Sea Island, could last forever or could be interesting forever, right? So along with advancement in education or education theories, the how scouting was being carried out has also changed, right? And then if we see further on, right, about 20 plus years later, a second version of the World Scout Youth Program policy was published, right? This called for further customization to meet the needs and aspiration of young people for each community. But what is also important in this version is many things were termed as, I'll call them non-negotiable, all right, or what is the underlying that will unify us as a movement. So there are things that in the policy will encourage us to tailor as much as possible, but there are also elements in the policy that we should remain faithful with, right? So we are looking at the one on the right, right? We are going to look into this policy and understand what is youth program in the 21st century, or how is it being perceived to be, right? So what we have established so far is from just that little progress, over the years, we know that youth program is no longer looked at as a one-size-fits-all solution, right? In fact, in the latest edition, we want to meet every single young person's needs as much as possible by providing them with a unique learning experience as much as possible, right? So, oops, okay, so the youth program policy, if you look at the document, is actually segmented into two main parts. One part is it describes the youth program life cycle, right? It explains the development and the implementation of youth program. It also spells out who are supposed to be involved in youth program at each of the level, right? So it is stated in the policy. The other portion about the policy covers the youth program definition. This is the part that I term as non-negotiable. This is the part that we should remain faithful, because this is a part that that actually unify us as a movement, right? So there are certain things that we should change, but there are certain things that we should be careful about not changing. Okay, so yeah, so let's look at this. Right, from this picture, what can we see here? Right, no need to answer on the chat group, but you can just have it in your mind. What do you see the young person doing there? Right, so probably you have 3 questions in mind. What is he doing? Why is he doing it? And how is it doing it? Right, this is just to give an example, a very quick example of what is youth program, right? So what is he doing? He's trying to start a fire, right? Right? So that is what he's doing, okay? But why is he doing so? Right? You might guess, right? He might want to keep warm, or he might want to cook something. So that's the why. And then how is he doing? How is he doing it? So from the picture, we can roughly see that he's actually, supplying air, or to be more precise, supplying oxygen to the fire, so that the fire can burn brightly. Of course, there are other elements inside there, but I mean, this is just a very quick illustration of what is youth program. So in youth program, in everything that we do in youth program, we always have these 3 questions. What are we doing? Why are we doing it? And how are we doing it? Right? So most of the time, if you keep asking these questions, you should be on the right track. Okay, so let's look at it deeper. Right, let's look at the definition first. The definition of youth program. Okay, so what is youth program really? So youth program is termed as the totality of learning opportunities from which young people can benefit, right? So basically, if you look at this, is really everything a young person do in scouting. Yes and no, right? So yes, it's everything that a young person do, but more precisely, is every learning opportunity. Okay, so what is the difference here? I mean, I'm not trying to confuse you or to play with words. There is a fine distinction in the youth program between what is an activity and what is a learning opportunity, right? We need to appreciate that to appreciate what the policy is trying to drive at, right? So basically, an activity is really something that we do. But not every activity is a learning opportunity. And every activity can be a learning opportunity, right? What is missing in many of the things is the why. We must have the why clearly map out, so that we are clear. Why are we doing something? Why are we doing the what? Right? So that the what can be a learning opportunity, right? This is based on a simple theory that learning, well, we can learn by incidentally or accidentally, right? We learn all the time, right? But scouting being an educational movement, we do not want to leave learning to chance. In fact, our whole entire mission and purpose is to create that learning opportunity for young people. All right. So so learning must be deliberate, right? And then when we organize something, or we help the young people to organize something, we must always have the why in mind, right? So the why is what we are creating. The activities where we create is the reason behind that, right? And the reasons that will support or to help us achieve the purpose of scouting. So that is the why, right? So we will know that in scouting, we are not just doing a random set of things and keep our fingers crossed and say, hey, we hope that you have learned something by the end of the day. No. But it's a very deliberate attempt. When we organize something, it's well thought through to map out what exactly the young person should learn by the end of the day. So that is the why. Okay? And this why is also not a random set of reasons. The why is must be supporting of converging towards the educational objective of the Scout movement in accordance to the principles and purpose of the movement. All right. And then how do we do it? Okay. So the how, straightforward, it must be done through the Scout method. Okay. So hope you are familiar with the Scout method, right? If not, you should tune in tomorrow, right? I understand that tomorrow is on AIS, right? I hope the speaker will say something about the Scout method, but I'll cover a bit just to orientate us about what the Scout method is. So the Scout method is really the method to the madness, right? So the many things that I described just now, in some of our mind, we might be thinking that, hey, it's a tall order, right? How can we achieve all this, right? But over and over the last 100+ years, it has been proven that when we apply the Scout method faithfully, we can achieve the why, right? Okay, so that's the basic definition of the youth program. Okay, so let's look at each of these aspects in a bit deeper, right? So the first thing that we are most concerned about is the why, right? So like I said, in scouting, we are doing everything for a reason, right? Well, sometimes we have fun for the sake of having fun, but most other time, we are having fun for a purpose, right? So we always want to meet the purpose of scouting and its educational objective. And in summary, so what is the purpose of scouting, right? Two things. We want active citizens. We want empowered individual, right? These two must come in hand in hand, because before someone can go out to the world and do good, the person must be I'm avoiding the word train, right? But the person need to be developed and given some sort of learning opportunities, so that after the person mature or is ready, then the person or the young person can be sent to the world to do something. But of course, it's not to say that we must wait until the young person to be 100% ready. I mean, to put it in a not a very nice way, we will always not be ready, right? When my boss always tell me to do something, I always think by myself, I'm not ready, right? So we can never be ready for something, right? We can only be ready when we are in the situation. So part of the empowerment of the individual is also about sending the young person into the world, into the community, and do something for the good of the community. So in a way, if you look at this diagram, they are actually a cycle. They are supporting one another. There is no before or after. There is not so much in the sense that you must achieve this so that you can do that, right? But of course, there are some considerations. Okay, but this is what I'm trying to say is that we shouldn't hold back to say that let's wait for the individual to be autonomous first before we send the person out to be active citizen, right? That's not what this is talking about. All right. So when we talk about a scout as a empowered individual, right, or the development of a person's character, if you unpack a person, if you can imagine with me, that a person is like a box, right? So how do you open up the box and look at every facet of the person? We all know that from education theory, or over the years, what people has agreed on, you can unpack a person's character to these 5 areas or these 5 aspects, right? The physical, intellectual, emotion, social, and spiritual, right? So these are the 5 aspects, and some of us might be a bit more familiar with the acronym SPICES, right? Which SPICES, right? Which basically stands for, each of these things, right? With the C with stands for character development. So basically, these are just the different area of personal growth or different facades of a person. These are the different areas that we should be deliberate in developing, so that that person will grow to be holistic, right? To be balanced, right? And then if we apply the development through the Scout method, we will be empowering the young person or the individual, right? So that when he grows up, he is capable of making clear decisions or wise decisions for himself, right? Next one, Scout as a active citizen. So this is the other aspect or the other purpose of the why. The why are we doing Scouting? So we want Scouts as active citizens. We want Scouts to create positive changes in their community, right? So there are 5 aspects of this, right? That what contributes to be an active citizen. And active citizen is autonomous, right? He's able to make choices and control his personal, social life, right? Not just as an individual, but also as a responsible member of the society, right? Active citizen is also supportive, right? He shows concern, empathy, concerns for others, right? He acts with others, for others. He thinks about others before himself, right? So that is a supportive individual. An active citizen is also responsible, right? He can be trusted to take responsibility for his own action, to keep the commitments that he has made, the promises that he has made, right? So you can see some of these things are falling back to our fundamentals, our Scout method, right? And whatever he say he will do it. So that's responsibility. Being an active citizen is also about being committed, right? When he believes in something, or when he takes a promise, like a Scout promise, he will do or act according to that values, or to the values that is being stated. When he subscribes to a cause, or he believes in an ideal, he will act accordingly. He is committed to his beliefs. An active citizen is also culturally sensitive, right? The culture here spans across not just the race, religion, language kind of culture, the ethnicity kind of culture, but it also spans across gender, right? An active citizen is respectful of others, is mindful of the practices and the beliefs of others, right? He will respectfully agree or disagree, right? And then he's being sensitive to the needs of the individual in his community, right? So this is the definition, the 5 elements of what makes a active citizen, right? So in Scouting, this is what we are trying to develop a young person to be an active citizen, and then also to be, right, an empowered individual by developing the 5 areas of personal growth, right? So this is the why are we doing scouting. The next aspect of youth program is about the what. The what, in a way, is the learning opportunities, right? So learning opportunities, loosely, if you term it, is where a young person can gather, can process knowledge, right? Can learn about something, can develop his attitudes, can learn about behavior, can learn about skills, right? And all this will contribute back to the development of his character, right? So what are we doing is supporting why are we doing it, or the other way around, whatever we are doing must stem from why we are, the reasons we are doing it. So, okay. The other thing important is don't forget the trends of the young people, right? So in current context where we are more concerned about tailoring the youth program to meet the needs and aspiration of every young person, right? We must not forget that it's no longer a one-size-fits-all situation, right? It's no longer to say that it's no longer enough to say that, you know, if everybody does this, then everybody will achieve the same learning outcome, right? The majority may, but it's no longer the case, right? If you, I'm not sure whether you have observed that in your own country, but certainly in many countries, young people has become more independent-minded. They are, in some young people's lingo, they are a bit more woke. They know what they want, and sometimes they will go all the way out to get it. So it's a bit different from your generation, my generation, where we will probably just listen and we will obey, and we will silently agree or silently disagree, and then we will just follow what the teacher say in the classroom, right? But in today's context, you know, there are young people who will boldly ask questions and boldly disagree with teachers, and that's, you know, how young people and how education has changed over the years. And scouting cannot be blind to that, because, you know, we must go according to the trends, or to what's happening in the world right now, right? And cater to today's young people, right? So of course, the not so healthy trends we will want to avoid, but we need to be very clear what's the in thing about for the young people these days. And if it doesn't countervene our value system, right? If it's not ethically wrong or legally wrong, it conforms to the fundamentals, then maybe we should consider whether you know, it is something that we can do for our young people. Okay, so that's a bit about the trends. The how, right? So I hope we are familiar with this picture. Some of us will start to think, hey, how come there's 8 elements here? It was 7 elements, right? Yeah, that's right. So some of us who are aware, 8th element was included in the Scout method, right? Can't remember when, was it last year or the year before? No, 2017, in the last, in two education congress in Canada. Yeah, I think they launched it around there or just before that, right? So it's been a couple of years. The 8th element is community involvement, right? And it falls very nicely in place in the purpose, right? Remember, one of the aspects that we want is to have active citizen. So being involved in the community becomes important, right? So as we know how to, when we apply the scout method, we will, the weightage and the method that we apply it across different age group, different section, varies slightly, right? So we will know that, you know, the way we approach the scout method for a Cub Scout will be different from how we apply it to a Scout, to a Venture Scout, to a Rover Scout, or we will even be slightly different in our approach when we are applying it to a tenderfoot, first year Cub Scout, or a Cub Scout who is about to graduate from Cub Scouting, right? So as a unit leader, we must be aware of the needs and the character of our young people under our charge, so that we can adjust the scout method accordingly. Right? So I will not spend too much time explaining the scout method, because I know tomorrow I think you are going to have a session on this, right? But I think at this moment it's good enough to know that, you know, the way we are carrying out scouting must, right? I will not even use the word should, must be through the scout method. Okay, so but of course, the other thing we need to take note is the eighth element of scout method is defined as so, right? I mean, there are some WOSM documents that describe, but in every NSO, we should also think about the scout method and then adjust it accordingly, apply it accordingly to our respective NSO, right? So every NSO will have their own needs and aspiration. So while we are thinking and trying to meet the needs and aspiration of the young people, we must also remember what the association or what the NSO stands for, right? So just to take a very simple example, right? The spirit of the Scout Promise and Law is the same for every NSO, right? The basic elements are there, right? But every NSO has tailored their promise and law, not just in the language, but to certain element, right? Just to pick a very simple example, right? I mean, if we trace back to the inverted comma original Scout Promise from the United Kingdom, right? They are still using loyalty to the Queen, right? But in our respective country where we are, you know, enjoying democracy, well, we say it differently, right? So there are elements that we can tailor in the Scout method to suit the NSO, you know, for that, right? Another example is the symbolic framework. The uniform, the badges, the story behind the progress scheme differs from NSO to NSO, right? So while the principles behind all this are the same, right? That is the unifying factor I was talking about just now. There are room for every NSO to tailor, you know, our needs to accordingly to our individual countries, right? I think one commonality between Singapore and India, we are both former British colony, right? So what I'm saying is we need not follow. I think we have stopped following what the British has already been doing in their in the UK Scout Association right now, right? But as long as we are following or crafting our fundamentals in the same spirit and principles of WOSM, right? We did not follow, well, accordingly or to what the UK is doing to the letter, right? We can customize or tailor it according to our respective NSO, right? Similarly, just like, you know, how we do our adult support, you know, so on and so forth, right? So that is something we want to keep in mind. Okay. The other thing about the youth program is about the life cycle. So we have covered the content, or what I've termed the non-negotiable. What I meant by non-negotiable is all this must remain as the central flavor or the core of what the program is, right? But of course, I've also explained that beyond the core principles, the core spirits of things, there are elements that we should look deep into so that it fits nicely to the context of our individual NSO, right? So the next part of the youth program policy is about this thing called the youth program life cycle, right? So I think this is something new, and we are saying that well, we know things are no longer a constant, right? The world is changing very quickly. Young people are changing very quickly. Their needs may not have changed, but their wants will probably have changed over the years, right? And we really want to work hard to catch up with them, or even better, be the trendsetter for the young people, right? This is one very sure way that as long as we are in step with them or ahead of these young people, we will continue to be an attractive I'll try not to use the word activity. Will be something attractive to the young people. Okay, so when we look at the life cycle, it's really about two parts. The first part is about the development of the youth program, and the other part is the implementation of the youth program, right? So we'll look a bit deeper in each of these aspects, right? So just as an overview, the process of the youth program development, we have 4 parts to it, right? It actually forms a very nice acronym called RACE, okay? The first part of the process is to reflect, right? So what do we reflect on? We reflect on the purpose, the principle, and the method of scouting, right? So your essential characteristics. And I've mentioned just now that while the central spirit of things, the central flavor must be constant so that there's a unifying thread across scouting across the world, there are other elements that we need to think hard about to tailor to our NSO, right? So we need to think about that. We need to reflect on that. How do we bring out the uniqueness of our NSO so that it resonates with your target audience? The next letter is A, stands for analysis, right? Remember just now I was talking about trends, the trends that young people are subscribing to these days, right? We must move with times, right? Just like, well, in my days as a scout, when we are holding a meeting, we will put up a notice on the notice board. Yeah, we still do that. To say that, hey, this Saturday is our meeting. Please, at this time, in front of the scout den, please bring this and prepare for that. So we put up a notice, right? So we must think that whether such practices are still practical or even attractive to young people these days, right? So there's a very simple example of some of the trends. So some of the trends will involve how young people communicate. Some trends will swing how young people will think, right? Sometimes will affect their value system. Certain things that is not acceptable 20 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, could be acceptable in today's context. Of course, it varies from country to country, right? And of course, there is no illusion that the trends of young people or the interests of young people is the same throughout the world, right? So what is attractive to a young person in 2020 in Singapore will be different from what a young person in 2020 in India will be, right? I would even go a step further to say that India is such a big country that different parts of India, there are the needs and interests of young people could be different from state to state, right? So there is a lot of room for us to think about this a bit deeper, to analyze it and look at it to see how best can we attract the young people in our target group, right? So let's analyze. Consider considerations. So what are some of the considerations that we should have in the development of the youth program, right? We must, I did mention briefly just now that we not just want to cater to the needs and aspiration of young people that we serve, we also want to cater to the needs and aspiration to the NSO, right? NSO have your own dreams, right? Whatever the dream is, you need to consider that, right? What are the aims? What are the objectives? What are the priorities for your NSOs, right? So this is a consideration. And then we have E, evaluation, right? So if you have a previous experience with the youth program, right? I mean, this may not be relevant to new NSO, but I think for NSO who has been around for some time, we need to evaluate what are some of the things that young people feel about the last version of youth program, right? So revising a youth program is not about changing for the sake of changing, right? Sure, we need to move with times, but we also need to think very hard. What are the things that we should keep? What are the things that are still attractive and relevant to the young people of today, right? There might be some things that they might still find it fun and attractive to do, right? We also want to know what is no longer attractive or relevant to these young people, right? So we need to evaluate, we need to look at what is the current youth program and then draw the experience from there, all right? So this will make up acronym RACE, right? So briefly, this is the process of youth program development. So we want to be deliberate in going through these 4 steps when we are considering to renew our youth program, and also during the process of renewing our youth program, we need to always keep all these 4 factors in mind. And then after we have our development, we will need to implement the youth program, right? At the recommendation of the current youth program policy is the youth program is implemented through a partnership between young people and adults, right? It's no longer about the adult leading or the adult dictating what a young person should do, right? Of course, this is a general statement. There are still some stage of a young person's life where an adult leader will still need to do a bit of hand-holding, right? So what we are saying here is really about the end game, the end objective, having a young person who is autonomous and being able to make wise decision about himself, right? And then the young person can be proposing what he wants to do as an activity or as a learning opportunity, or to the extent that the young person could be proposing, this is the way I would like to earn this badge, right? So that is the ultimate goal that we want to look forward to. But of course, there are a lot of hard work in between, right? And constantly, the adult must see himself as a partner to this journey with the young person, right? And then, of course, it must be based on the young person's interests, the needs and abilities, right? So in the implementation of a youth program, we have a few actors. Okay, so who are these people? We have a facilitator. So well, we are very used to the term leader, right? But I think in today's context, the person who is leading is the young person, right? So what the adult should be doing is to facilitate that learning experience for the young person, right? In other words, how do we turn an activity into a learning experience, right? In very short, if you are familiar, some of us who might be in education, if you have heard about experiential learning, right? We have heard about Klopp, who is behind the learning theory. This is exactly what I'm talking about. How does the scout leader help bring the young person from the concrete experience, right? And come out with decisions that the young person make about what to do next, right? So in the policy, it's recommended the leader plays the role of a facilitator in implementing the youth program. We also have the developer, right? These developers are the people who design the policy, the national youth program policy. They are also the people who comes out with the program scheme, right? So they are the designers, right? But you know, as we have appreciated earlier on, it's not as simple as taking a pen and to decide, you know, this goes here, this goes there. There are a lot of things to consider, and you know, if you go back to the race, right, they are supposed to go through this cycle, right, in the development of the youth program, and then to come out with something for everybody, right? So again, there are certain things you will see in a youth program, or in most youth program, there are certain things that a young person will have to go through, and then a good youth program will leave some room for the young person to tailor his own learning experience. And then the next actor in the implementation of youth program is the supporter, right? There are really a lot of things to do as a scout leader, right? And we often say that we are not expecting a unit leader to be a Superman, right? So we need supporters, right? So the supporters could be from at different level, right? The supporter could come all the way at from the unit level. A supporter could be a parent who, say for example, is an engineer, right? And then you know, that parent is more than happy to help out, help you to do some STEM batch, STEM, right? In engineering, in robotics, or in whatever area, according to his expertise, right? So he, in that sense, he is a supporter to the youth program. Supporter could also be, you know, in your district commissioners, or all the way to your headquarters commissioner, right? And you know, anyone that helps you to develop and implement your youth program, they are, or they can be termed as the supporter. So what we are painting the picture here is coming out or implementing the youth program is a huge job. It cannot be a one person's work. It is almost humanly impossible, right? So we need different people, different expertise, different people who are playing different role to come in and do all this, either one or another, or you know, and then support the youth program so that the youth program could be successful, right? So that is about the life cycle of youth program. Okay. Next thing I want to touch on is still on the policy, right? There are 7 principles that we have for the policy, right? So these are some of the things that we want to be faithful, right? And you know, to follow or to use the recommendation and follow these principles in our design and implementation of our youth program, right? So the first aspect is having the young person or the young people at the center, right? We want to look at the program through a young person's lens. We are designing the youth program for young people, right? Or rather, we are not designing, okay, let me rephrase that. We are designing a framework so that the youth program, the experience of the youth program can be created by the young person and not for them, right? So we want to move away from dictating or prescribing exactly what to do to enabling them, helping them make the decision, helping them to come to the decision to say that, hey, this is what I want to learn. And then empower them with the right resources, right? To learn and then to have their skills validated, right? So we must always see the young person as the center of the youth program. So the youth program should not be something that, is something that as a scout leader I can do. So this is the youth program, right? This is something I'm comfortable to do. This must be the youth program. No, so that shouldn't be the case, right? So we want to put the young person always at the center, right? We'll appreciate the importance of this later on when we touch about the growth, right? Next is about education, right? We all know that scouting is a non-formal education movement, right? So education should be our what we do every day, right? So what we need to offer to the young people is education, right? We have an education proposal for these young people, right? And we want to help them develop as an individual, right? And then to have a realistic view and be ready to the real world, right? So in Scouting for Boys, if you have recall, it's about the skills, right? I think in those days, in Baden Powell's days, I don't think life skills was being used, right? But in today's context, we call it a life skills, right? Some will even call it a survival skills, right? But this survival skills is not about lighting fire with sticks, but this survival skill is how do we survive out in the real world, right? So the life skills. So even in Scouting for Boys, in the good old days of Baden Powell, he is already talking about skills that are required for a young person to acquire when he enter society for work. What are some of these skills that are useful so that this young person, after going through scouting, has an edge over other young people who has not been into scouting, right? So this has been central, the central idea, right? Of course, in those days, BP has termed, he has named a few like bricklaying, right? Because bricklayers are supposed to make good money in those days. Horse riding, people still ride horses, right? But I think in today's context, if we want to carry that over to the 21st century and say that, boys, let's us do horse riding, right? They might think that it's more of a recreational activity rather than a core skills that they need to acquire. So we need to be quite clear what are the life skills that we need to prepare our young people so that upon graduating from scouting, right, as they enter society as a young adult, they will be ready for the world, right? They are equipped enough for the world. Okay. Develop active citizen, right? So we want to develop young people to be active citizen of their communities. The word community can be termed, we should look at it a bit loosely, right? This community could be as close as your neighborhood, right? Your immediate, the immediate place that you stay, right? This community can be stretched as far as in the entire country, right? Or even internationally, where you have a common interest. Okay, so the young, where in different contexts, we will define our community slightly differently, right? And then, but the central idea is still the same. We want to be an active citizen in that community. We want the young people to be responsible, to be committed, right? In that community, and hopefully, we have equipped them enough so that they are confident and competent enough to stand up as a leader in that community, right? So that's what we want as a active citizen, right? The other part about active citizen, which I've covered just now, is about an autonomous decision maker, right? So we want to start with that, so that we will know that, I mean, if we keep making a decision for a young person, he will never learn how to make good decisions, right? Because he will never struggle with the dilemma. He will never have to think through the various and weigh the different consequences, right? And then, of course, if he make a bad decision, he may or may not, suffer from it, right? But the best way to learn how to make decision, I don't know, is probably make decisions, right? The more we make decisions, the better we will be at it, right? Well, we do make a lot of decisions from day to day, right? But what is important here, or what is different here, is the decisions that we want them to make is to be decisions that are affecting to their own growth and development, right? So we want them to take control of their own development, not just during scouting, but after they have graduate from scouting, they will still continue with that. The other principle is be locally adapted and globally united, right? So I was saying every NSO will have a different audience. We have different historical background, right? We have a different makeup, right? So there are certain elements that we will want to remain faithful as part of the global movement, right? But there are other factors that we want to tailor according to our NSO, right? So that is the other principle, being locally adapted, globally united. The other important aspect is being updated and relevant. So I was giving an example just now, right? If we keep on saying that every scout meeting we must do horse riding, the young person might not see the purpose, right? I mean, it's fun for the first few times, but they will not see it as something that they will be useful to most of them when they enter society, right? We all know that we often pay a bit more attention to something that we are learning when it is relevant to us, right? Not just relevant, the youth program must also be updated so that we are riding the trends, right? So we are in tune with the young people, okay? Scouting is also about being open to all, right? This all is beyond the gender mix, right? Right? Scouting is supposed to be co-education, but the open to all is beyond that. Okay, we want to meet the needs of all young people. In fact, if you say, or if you ask who is the target audience of scouting in a certain place, it must be all the young people, right? So the all will encompass the cultural difference, right? Whichever sector or of the society they may in, whatever economy status, right? Some of us who know about BP's experiment, 10 of the boys that he brought to Brown Sea Island are the middle upper class, people who goes to good schools, right? And the other 10 are just normal street boys that he found, from the neighborhood, right? And he has successfully demonstrated 100 years ago that these people, they can mix, they can learn together, they can live together, and they can have a good time, right? So it cuts across all economic status, right? Of course, race, religion, gender, right? Right, and it also should extend to people with disability, right? We want to embrace them, and they should be given an opportunity to enjoy scouting like the rest of us. The other principle about youth program is it must be attractive, challenging, and meaningful, right? I think no matter what system, as in how we recruit our young people, right? I think in APR, a lot of our NSO are school-based, right? Versus in some other NSO, they are community-based. I think regardless of that, I think young people are always out looking for challenge, right? It's a classical Goldilocks thing, right? Goldilocks and the Three Bear. It must not be too cold. It must not be too hot, right? It must be just nice, okay? So it cannot be too easy that the young people will think that, come on, it's easy peasy, or you're wasting my time, right? It also cannot be too difficult that they find it impossible and they will give up before they are successful, right? So it must come in the right level of difficulty. The right support must be given to these young people so that it remains challenging to them, right? There must be some rigor to it. It must be attractive to them. They must be interested in it, right? And that it must be meaningful. They must find meaning. They must see what is in for them, right? Of course, behind the scene, we all know that we want active citizen, we want global, but for them, I don't think a young person will ever join scouting if you're telling them that, hey, come and join me, I'll make you a good citizen. I don't think they will do that, right? So they are all going for activities, or they are joining you because what the activities offers them in terms of the level of fun and of course what they will bring back with them, right? So it must be fulfilling, it must be meaningful, right? So these are the 7 principles that we should always keep an eye on as part of our youth program, right? So maybe as part of the reflection of our or evaluating of our existing youth program, you can make use of this and ask ourselves, how many of these have we achieved? All right. Okay. The other part about youth program is about how do we use this youth program? Okay, I'll just mention this a bit quicker because I think some of this I think I'm aware that most of you are coordinators for growth, right? So I won't spend too much on this, spend too much time on this, right? So how are we spending? How are we using the youth program policy, right? So one of the way is to use this as a document to coordinate with others in NSO, right? So our documents in our NSO should take reference from this policy, right? As well as our processes. What are some of these documents? It might be your National Youth Program Policy, right? Of course. It might be your National Youth Involvement Policy. It might be even your Adult in Scouting Policy, right? So this is one of the reference that you might use in your discussion, with the different stakeholders involving your NSO's document. The other more important aspect is you're using this policy as a foundation to the training and support of adult leaders, right? What WOSM advocates is training exists to support the carrying out of the youth program. So when we are developing adults to be leaders, they must understand what the youth program is about, right? What is the end goal of the youth program, right? So this document will be useful to help them understand all this. The other thing which this document is useful is about age section, right? One thing that we want to do is to differentiate or segregate out the youth program to different ages, right? And keep asking ourselves whether these age sections are still relevant to today's context, right? So our NSO could be segmented into different age sections already, but we also want to keep reviewing it as we review our youth program, right? This is so that, again, to keep our youth program relevant and attractive to the young people, because it's not just the program that is important to the young people. The other very important element of the youth program is this thing called a group life, right? So who they do scouting with, who their buddies, who their partners, who is in their patrol is important, right? So there is quite a lot of thinking put through how do we craft age sections, a lot of points to be considered, right? That is all captured in this document called the RAP, which I was saying I was part of reviewing, right? So you might want to pick up RAP and take a look, right, on what are we supposed to consider when we are designing the age sections, right? The other thing about the use of this document is to promote, of course, the youth program, right? So we're not going to spend too much time on that. Time frame and lifespan, right? Youth program not supposed to last forever, right? So that is a strategy, right? I mean, part of this youth program is part of the jigsaw of the triennium plan, right? So this is more as an overview, right? To help us appreciate where are we right now, right? So if you recall a bit about what is the Vision 2023, right? And then the 3 triennium plans are a series of strategies to accumulate to that vision, right? So right now we are in the 2nd triennium, which is where the youth program, this current policy, should be implemented by NSOs already, right? Of course, when I say we are in the 2nd triennium, it's only half correct. We all know that the World Conference is supposed to be held sometime, I think, this year, but it has been postponed because of the current situation. But we are still stuck in the 2nd triennium, so we are in this interim period, okay? But that's beside the point, right? So having some background understanding of what the youth program, or having a better appreciation of the policy behind youth program, let's dive into growth, right? Which is really the key topic for today, right? So how do we encourage growth? How do we recruit? How do we retain? So what are the considerations that we should have as an NSOs, in this aspect, right? Not sure whether this is a bit small, right? I hope you can read the words. In terms of growth, right, WOSM has come up with a recommendation or a framework, right, to define or to strategize how we can cater for growth, right? So there's this framework that was proposed, right? There are 7 key ingredients, right? I'll take you through one by one, right? We have, it's even a bit small for me. The first one is the strategy for growth, right? So there must be a target being set, right? When we say growth, right, we must say how much to grow. We must know what can we grow, where can we grow. right? So it's not just about saying, let's grow, right? Just like running a business, we must have a plan, we must have a target, right? So we must set a target and we must have a plan, right? So next one is the youth program, right? Which is one of the element or one of the ingredients for growth. So we want an exciting, engaging, up-to-date quality youth program. So this is consistent with what we have just talked about as part of the youth program policy. Adults in scouting is also another very important aspect of growth, right? Because without adult leaders, we may not have scouting as we know it, right? So we need adults to support the young people, right? So we must be able to find, develop, retain leaders and adult volunteers. The next ingredient is communication, right? It's about having engaging communication to better tell a story of scouting, right? Some people say that scouting is the best kept secret in the world. It's so good, but not a lot of people know about it. Well, I'm not sure, but I think in our own community, probably we can find out a bit more of how well people know about scouting, right? For sure, I know in my own context in Singapore, well, people may have heard about scouting, but if you ask them or talk to them or try to find out a bit more how well or how much do they know about scouting, they may not have an answer or a right answer, right? So the idea or the picture in their mind, I mean, the best case is a fuzzy picture. The worst case is if it's a bad picture, right? So you want to have good communication with your community, to the people out there, to tell your story. We are doing a lot of good in scouting, so people should hear about it. We should also look for partners, right? Partners for growth, right? Because what the needs and aspiration of young people are so diverse these days, right? We may not, or we probably cannot cater totally to it, right? Well, there might be one of the scout in your scout unit that wants to fly a plane, and the other one wants to do scuba diving, and then the third one who wants to jump out of a plane. Well, I mean, these are all legitimate aspirations, but right. But what I'm trying to paint a picture here is to cater to such diversity, we need partners. We need more avenues and opportunities to open up platform for these young people. Organization, right? To grow, the organization itself, our NSO must be strong, right? We must play a role that is supporting the local groups to help them grow, right? Because along the journey, there will be many challenges, there will be many questions, and the NSO must be prepared or be poised in the position to be able to make that support, right? If you look at it from the other perspective, if you have been following what WOSM has been doing, is exactly that, right? WOSM has been investing a lot of resources, right? You have created a WOSM services platform. Recently, he has created a Scout Academy, right? To support all these initiative, right? They have also recruited WOSM consultants. That's why I have a job, to support NSOs, right? So all this is part of the grand plan to strengthen the organization so that we are poised for growth, right? We all know that to build a building, the foundation must be strong. Outreach, right? And recruitment and outreach, right? So after we all do all this, there must be effort to go out there and reach out to new members, right? How do we go into their community and bring them to yours, okay? But we are not going to look at all these 7 today. This is just to give you a very brief overview. What we are looking today is, of course, youth program, right? So I hope to bring the relevance to you that youth program can be and is a key ingredient for growth, right? So this is what the toolkit says. You know, our youth program is at the core of what we do as Scouts, right? So we have seen the definition of what a youth program is in totality what a young person do. So it is core to what we do as Scouts, right? So we live and breathe for youth program really, right? So a quality program provides an engaging, challenging, and exciting scouting experience. You'll see some of these keywords keep repeating, right? Okay, so from the policy, you can see many of these ideas has been carried over, and really, if you ask me, why some of these terms or aspects has been created this way, is really youth program has been designed, or the policy has been designed as a growth tool, right? Or my perspective is youth program is really a catalyst, or is a key ingredient for scouting to grow, right? And one which is regularly updated helps you to keep it fresh and relevant. So again, this has been mentioned in the principles of the youth program, right? So it must be fresh to the young people, right? It must be relevant to the young people. It must be attractive to them, right? So there was this story that was often told in youth program. I'm not sure whether you have heard it before, right? It's a story about fishing, right? So when you are trying to fish, when you have to catch a fish, what do you put at the end of the line? Of course, it's the hook. What do you put on the hook? You will put the fish favorite food, right? What is fresh and relevant to the fish? You will not put a hamburger there. Hamburger could be my favorite food, but I don't think by putting my favorite food at the hook, the fishes will come, right? Maybe some with the same taste as I do will, but surely you will not have the bulk of them, right? So in the very same way, this is a simple analogy. I'm not saying young people are like fishes, but it is really like a bit like fishing. You want to have learning opportunities which are relevant and attractive to these young people, so that they will swim to you. Right? So these are by far the biggest contributing factors to the attraction and retention of your members, and fundamental cornerstone to any growth strategy. Right? So this is what the toolkit says. We will look at some of the recommendations as part of the ingredient, right? Let me try to recall how many of them. I think, is it 6 or 7? Okay. Yeah. So, well, while I was doing this, I was trying to find a way to express, you know, how do we put growth with youth program, right? So I was trying to look at youth trends, right? And I stumbled across this expression: something or someone X something or someone, right? So this is what I've learned, you know, when I was doing this, right? The X really means collaborate, right? So growth collaborating with youth program. So how can they be in sync? How can they synergize, right? So one of the key success factors for youth program to attract and retain young people. There must be youth involvement, right? I will come to the explanation of each of these part in a short while, but let's go through the elements first, the key success factors first. So there must be youth involvement, right? To have growth, to make use of the youth program for growth. There must be regular review of the program, right? So some of this you might already have the picture in your mind. Yes, we always must keep it fresh and relevant. Relevance and attractiveness of the program to the young people. Remember the story about catching fishes. Challenge, progression, opportunities, skills for life, right? What is deemed useful to the young people, right? I'm very sure every young person are thinking about their future, right? And they want to learn something that is useful. The role of adults in designing and supporting the program. So this is again a part of the youth program, right? So we have covered that just now. Transition between age sections, right? Something important to think about, right? So I was saying there are a lot of considerations that we need to put in as part of the age section, right? How do we make it attractive and relevant to the young people, right? You do not want an age section to be too wide, right? And then the older members of the age section will be thinking, I'm just doing a babysitting service. And then the younger members of the patrol will be thinking, this is something I can never do, right? All these activities are for the big boys, right? So you do not want that range to be too big. And of course, the transition between them is not just how the age section are being designed, how we transit from a section to another section is also important, right? There are some findings through the study from WOSM, why young people drop out, right? So part of it was because of the transition. How can we have a smoother transition and make it easier for the young people to adapt? The other aspect is diversity and inclusion. We want to really make scouting open to all. And then how do we have innovative ways to deliver the program? Right, so let's look at the first key success factors. If we want growth, right? And now thinking that how can we use our youth program to design the growth element into our youth program? We need this thing called youth involvement, right? We need to involve young people in decision making, in the decision making process, right? Firstly, in the scouting experience, right? Because by including them into this decision making, we will empower them, right? We let them to be the master of what they want to do, right? And then by involving them, we are also ensuring that the program content is always relevant to them, because this is what they want to do. This is what they aspire to do. So in our youth program framework, there must be element, of course, there are guidelines, right? That will allow the young person to state what they want to achieve and probably how they want to achieve certain things, right? So we want to encourage that, right? And let them be involved in the decision-making process, right? So how do we involve young people in decision-making? So again, this is pitched at a very general level, okay? We must remember that all these recommendations are general, right? So of course, when we are thinking about a Cub Scouts unit or a tenderfoot in the unit, right? Some of this we need to level down a bit, right? So of course, we cannot expect a 3-day-old recruit, a 3-day-old scout to make decisions of certain things. Well, to a certain aspect, if he's a rover scout, maybe, right? Because he's matured as a person. He has already a lot of experience and knowledge behind him, right? He has already been developed as a person prior to that, right? So he may be a new scout. He's not a new person, right? But if you're looking at a younger person, probably a young teenager, who is probably not so matured, right? A 3-day-old scout may not have the ability or even the confidence to do so, right? So what is weaved in between here, right? It's not just about simply letting go. Empowerment is not about letting go and you go and do what you like, right? So that's not empowerment. right? There is a deliberate process where it's a bit like flying a kite. I'm not so sure young people these days do fly a kite, but it's really like flying a kite. From the start, you need a bit of a control over the kite, right? But as the kite flies higher, you cannot or you should not control. The more you control, the more unlikely the kites will fly higher. So empowerment is a bit like that. You need to let go. You need to let go, loosen the string, so that the kite can go higher, right? So I mean, yeah, that I hope is a simple analogy of empowerment, right? So there is a process to prepare the young people, right? To build the competencies, to build the confidence, so that when they are almost ready for the war, then they will not they will be ready for the war, right? So that's empowerment. Okay, so what are the ways that you can involve a young person in decision making? So the first step is really in the units. There are certain structure or fixed activity that we call that in the units that we do that involves that. I hope we are still practicing things like patrol in corner, or patrol corner, or patrol council, right? Or the court of honor, right? So all these are supposed to be youth-led, youth making decisions for themselves, for their peers, right? They're supposed to debate, discuss, and then come up with something that is agreeable and beneficial for everybody, right? So that is youth involvement in the unit. It can also be in the institution, right? Are we involving our young people in some of the committees that we have, decision-making bodies that we have in the NSO, right? So in the youth involvement policy, we are saying that there should be young people in every decision-making body, right? They must be represented, right? Do we encourage them? Is there a process that we will bring young people out from the unit level, giving them the opportunity, the exposure, to a bigger forum, right, nationally, or even to a fixed or permanent decision-making body like the Commissioners' Council, or I'm not sure what is it called in India. In Singapore we call it the Scouts Council, which is the the highest decision-making body. So or even in some of the subcommittees that we have in each of the departments in the NSO, do we have enough, or do we have young people that is on board, that is giving their perspective to the policies that we make, right? Of course, this is contextual. We are not expecting to have Cub Scouts, right? This is really more towards the end of the youth program, probably at the Rover or even at the Venture Scout age, right? But what is entirely possible is having youth involvement in the community. So like I mentioned before, in the community, we can define what is the community at every stage, or to the young person, right? So it can be as as small, or even the common small as, or as close to as their immediate family. So that could be their community. So how can they make an impact in their community for young Cub Scouts? Or for someone who is older, right? They can write on or make use of the Better World framework, right? And do community projects, right? Nationally or even internationally, right? So these are ways that we can involve a young person. How can we get them to make decision, right? Regular review of the youth program, right? I think I find myself saying that a lot already. Today, youth program must be attractive, up to date, relevant, right? So you must keep pace with the changing society, right? So what is being said about the 21st century is well, we all know change is a constant. That didn't change in the 21st century. But what has changed about changes in the 21st century is change is at a faster pace today, right? Things get obsoleted much faster, get out of fashion much faster these days, right? In probably our parents' time, if you graduate from a school, right, equipped with some skills, that skill could carry on for life. Those were the days where when you hear about a professional being in one job for his entire life. But in today's context, for the young people, it's a lot different. Some studies has said that some of the jobs for our Cub Scouts or even our Scouts, our 12-year-old, 15-year-old, by the time they enter society, has not been invented yet, right? So that is how fast things are changing, right? So how do we equip these people to perform a job that has not even been invented yet, right? Right. So which is why there is this focus on life skills, right? On the skills that how they can survive in the 21st century society, right? So we need to keep pace. We need to help the young people to keep pace so that we do not, the Scouts movement will not be seen as something that is still about lighting fire or about, making structure. Well, there is place for all this in the Scout program, right? But what I'm saying is that there must also be activities or learning opportunities that cater to other aspects to prepare them for the society. Okay, we need to address emerging needs and expectation of each generation. Okay, so what our generation, we cannot use the same assumption of our time to say that, well, young people, I've been through this, so you must be. Okay, they will have their own thinking, they will have their own needs, so we need to address them. If we don't address that, if we ignore them, you will find that young people will not be attracted to Scouting, right? So what we are being very careful here is there are certain elements in Scouting that we want to hold very jealously to, and that is really our fundamentals. That will not change. That should not change, right? Because that represents the characteristics, the values, the foundation of the Scout movement. Okay, but there are some elements that we can say that, well, we all know that pioneering helps build teamwork. Is there something else that we can do if the why of that learning opportunity is about building teamwork? Can we have a session of network games, right, which is attractive to young people, right? Of course, I think that is not a very good example because a lot of these network LAN games involving violence, shooting each other, okay? But of course, we should not encourage that, but I'm just giving an example that, well, it must be something attractive, but yet conform to the values of the Scout movement, right? And then it should meet their needs and expectation, right? So it must be remain faithful to the fundamental principles of the movement. So these are the non-negotiable, because this is what makes Scouting, right? So if we give up on that, then what's the point of calling ourselves a Scout? So a formal review, as recommended by the youth program policy, is to take place every 5 years at the national level. Okay. Personally, I read this a bit loosely, right? Well, when Singapore did our review, the review itself took more than 5 years, right? So if we are very strict in the reading of this statement, by the time we finish the review, we haven't started implementing, we need to start reviewing again. Of course, that's not the point, right? What I'm saying is also sharing from our experience. Review is a lengthy, tedious, tiring, but fulfilling process, right? It will take you some time, okay? But I see the review here as looking into aspect and ask ourselves, is it still relevant? Is it still attractive? We must have setting an alarm at every 5 years to have the alarm sound to remind ourselves, should we be reviewing our program? Your answer could be very well be, no, our program is still relevant for today's context. We need not make a major revamp. We can, there might be some things that we need to do a bit of tweaking, right? So I read the review from that perspective, right? It's not about tearing down the house and rebuild it again, but that review, it could be something, a small renovation, to help us to keep ourselves at the tip of the trend. Relevance and attractiveness, right? So I think, again, I think I've said a lot about this. So, right, so what is recommended in the toolkit, right? If young people feel that scouting offers them positive challenge and opportunity, right, they are more likely to stay. If a society contribution is appreciated in the society, it can and will help attract more members, right? So what are we saying here, or what is this toolkit recommending, right? The young people, they must find it meaningful to stay. The reason they leave is probably they see that, I'm going nowhere. I don't find this meaningful. I find this boring, right? This is, a waste of time for me, right? So you want to keep the young people in scouting, you must counter that. You must keep things exciting. You must keep things challenging. You must keep them learning. And then how do you attract them, right? More people needs to hear about the good stories about scouting. Scouting needs to walk into the community and impact the community, right? So the more scouting do for the community, and when the community recognizes that scouting is doing a great job, more people will want to be a scout, right? Put it this side, I mean, I think the EPL has just restarted. I hope you watch football, right? Which football team will you support, or which football team do you support? I'm quite sure very often most of our answer is a football team who has been winning, right? Nobody wants to support a losing team unless there are other reasons, right? So for the young people, I think it's very much the same. They want to be on the winning side. They want to be part of the heroes of the society, the everyday hero. So if they see scouts have been going around and impacting the community, young people will gravitate towards the movement. And there is really a part of the program that supports this, right? So the Better World framework, right? The recommendation is to integrate it into the youth program, right? So that the young people has a direct way to contribute to the SDG, right? So if you look at the Better Way framework, right, it contributes to both of these aspects in terms of recruitment as well as retention. Why? Because part of the Better World framework is about going out to the community, right, and making waves. And part of the Better World framework is about throwing a challenge to the young person. The young person sets a goal. The young person finds way around the problem or the issue and get the project done, right? So really, the Better World framework is a very good platform for the young people to attract and retain young people. Okay. Challenge and progress opportunity, right? So I mentioned young people join scouting not because they want to be a good citizen. I don't think if we survey the young people, either past, present, or future, young people who are in scouting, I don't think anybody will say that I joined scouting to be a good citizen, right? But they join scouting because they see it as a fun thing to do. They see excitement. They see opportunities to learn. They see opportunity to make friends. All these are very important to a young person, right? So they see this from their perspective. So when we know what attracts them, right? Shouldn't that be our strategy to attract them? Okay. So they're likely to stay. They want to be continually challenged, right? So the moment they have a down moment in their scouting life, right? They will their interest will fizzle off, right? So you need to keep stoking their interest, keep them excited, keep them challenged, right? And of course, the aim is really at the start you'll be giving them some challenge for them to live up to, but subsequently you want them to set a challenge for themselves and then achieve that challenge. Okay. So the program must be progressively challenging, right? So as we move on from section to section, it must move on in terms of the challenge, and also from different part of the age section, or different age group on the age section. That's why you have different badges for the age section. It must progressively bring the young people from heights to heights. The role of adults in designing and supporting a youth program, right? So again, it's part of the youth program. Adult leaders have a direct stake in the youth program, right? So unit leaders must be trained to create, develop, and deliver qualitative, engaging, and exciting programs and activities, right? So they must be able to meet the aspiration of the young people, right? So they, okay, I'm trying to, I'm not sure how many educators do we have among us, right? Some of us may have heard about this often used term in education. Education used to be where a teacher is a sage on the stage, right? A teacher is a master of all, who knows everything about their subject, right? And the student is expected to learn from the master, right? So that used to be the case, okay? It's not to say that educators become less smart these days, but really because of the diverse knowledge and the depth and the speed young people want things, right? And the other major aspect is what we want young people to achieve is to be self-directed. This concept about self-directedness, right? So in education, it has moved from a stage to a stage where teachers become a guide by the side, right? So a teacher no longer say you must learn this, right? But the teacher points to clues or possibilities, and the young person or the student will explore, right? And learn very much on his own, right? And validate his knowledge with the teacher, right? And that's how they learn. They learn not just from the interaction with the teacher, they also learn with the interaction or with the fellow students, right? If you look at that in parallel, isn't that a bit like what we have been doing in the Scout method with our patrol, right? We have progressive learning, right? So in a way, I don't know which came before the other, right? Since the early days in scouting, we have already been saying we want our scouts to be self-directed, right? That's another way of looking at it, to say that is about the empowerment of young people, right? Part of the empowerment is they need to be self-directed. Okay. So we need unit leaders to understand that aspect, and then to move themselves down from the stage, and then to park themselves next to them and to be the guide by their side. So at the national level, there must be programs to support, right, using the AIS framework to support that for the young, for the leaders to do so, as well as the resources for leaders to implement the program. These resources could be toolkits. These resources could be physical artifacts. These resources could also be partnership opportunities being offered to them, right? To say that, well, this young person is aspired to be a pilot. I can't fly a plane. I got no plane, but can I get some help from my national headquarters and ask around, hey, anyone knows if there's any opportunity for us to help this young person fulfill his dream, right? So that includes in all the resources that we have. Transition between age section, right? So there was a study that's being carried out, and to a certain extent, young people are saying that when they move from section to section, it is a daunting thing, right? I think many of us have experienced that, maybe not just in scouting, right? If you recall, from primary school to secondary school, from the biggest boy in your primary school, you become the smallest boy in your secondary school, right? Same thing, from the biggest boy in your secondary school, you become the smallest boy in the college, right? So in the same way, it is a very daunting thing for young people when they move from section to section. So we need to be, now that we know, we need to be mindful of that, right? So we want to cushion that effect, right? The other aspect of that study was they discovered that, you know, at the tail end of every section, there's a greater tendency of the older member to be less excited. Well, I think it's fair, really, because well, he or she has been doing the same thing, more or less the same over the years. His friends, his patrol mates, well, made out of older people to people of the same age to much younger people, right? As he progressed, right? Things are getting easier and easier, less challenging, right? So I don't think it's a surprising statement to the finding to say that young people are being less excited at the tail end, right? So what we part of this strategy is about how do we cushion that, these two aspects, right? So one of the recommendation is at the tail end of the age section, we want to be deliberate in exciting the young person about what they can look forward to in the next age section. So it's a bit like, you know, giving advertisements to them and help them visualize what they can do, let's say from a scout to a venture scout, from a Cub Scout to a scout, right? So we could be deliberate in partnering up with different units so that they can have a taster of the experience of the next section, right? And then to have a glimpse of what they can experience, so that you excite them enough so that when they move on, or when they eventually move on, they will want to remain as a scout, right? The other aspect is when the new unit receive them, they must be welcoming, right? It must be a safe environment. When I say safe, it's not just safe physically, it's about psychological safety, right? So they must not feel that because they are the smallest member in the patrol or the smallest member in the unit, they will be at the end of something bad, right? There are people who are readily making friends with them and sharing things with them, right? So that they will be immediately feeling welcome and integrated into the unit as they progress, right? So you do not want to have the case where they join the new section, the U unit, and then without doing anything, they feel lonely. They may not make friends as fast, and then then the interest tapers off, and then they will leave. Diversity and inclusion, right? We want to be open to all, right? So there are many, if you use a business term, untapped market, right, in every country, right? We can do a simple calculation. What's the population of young people in the country versus the population of scouts or young members do you have, right? Then we know what is our market penetration rate, right? And then we will know that what is the size of the market that we have not reached to, right? I think it's safe to say that in every country there is a large untapped market. We want to be a bit more creative in that sense, to think about how can we draw young people from different background, from inverted comma non-traditional sources, and welcome them into scouting, right? We also want to be exploring and reviewing the expectations of young people from different background, right? So you must know your current demographics. So if you're most of the young people you're drawing from is from this certain profile, then you'll be asking the question, how can I reach another profile, right? So you need to do a bit of data analysis, right, to find out, which other area can you work on, right? The last aspect of the key success factor is to be innovative in the way you deliver the program, right? This is to say that we should not be too fixated in a certain way of doing things, right? I think some of us, especially as the NSO is doing scouting the same way for a very long time, we tend to fall into this, right? Just for example, scouting in Singapore used to be carried out, we're all school-based. Scouting in Singapore used to be carried out on a Saturday, right? And then people get very uncomfortable when, or rather, so most of the scout unit operate on a Saturday, and we did not realize that there's a very large untapped market on a Sunday, right? There are interested young people who would like to join scouting, but for one reason or another, could not make it on a Saturday, right? So for units who start their activities or to hold their activities on Sunday, became popular, and they will grow, right? So by just tweaking the way, some aspect of how we carry things out, we may be opening up new avenues to new members, right? So as long as we are faithful to the fundamental characteristics of scouting, right, we must have the confidence that the scout method is strong enough for every of these different type of people or different demographics or different profile that we reach out to, right? It will still be able to, right? So there are some of the recommendations in the toolkit, right? So you might want to consider having a different meeting time. So the example I was giving you, instead of all the units having meeting on a Saturday, can we have some units to have their meeting on a Sunday? Location, right? Not all young people have the luxury of transportation in one way or another to where you hold your meeting, right? If they cannot come to scouting, can you bring scouting to them? How about if in certain community where it's small, you are unable to have a big or sizable unit of a certain age section, can you consider a mixed age group unit, right? So there are many ways, really. I mean, borrowing from the idiom, many ways to skin the cat, right? So if we think a bit more creative or innovative out of the box, we can, right, through the analysis of the needs or wants of people who may be interested in scouting, how can we meet their needs, right? So that's the second segment, right? So we have covered the youth program policy. Okay, we also have covered the youth program aspect of the tools for growth, right? How do we use youth program as an ingredient for growth, right? So that was what we have just covered. So the next thing that we want to move into is to understand what is our growth potential, right? So to grow, we must be ready to grow. We must know how much can we expand, right? So again, probably not the best analogy. It's just like running a business, right? If you want to open up more branches, offer more products, you must answer the questions of how far can I go? So what is the potential that you can grow? So there is a growth self-assessment tool provided by WOSM that we can make use of, right? So the questions within that self-assessment tool are designed to help you reflect on the readiness of your NSO to grow and to map the area of focus to support your NSO growth journey, right? So it's a self-assessment toolkit. So within your NSO or in your context, you could do it in your region, right? In your state to analyze, what's your growth potential, and then from the toolkit, it will provide you certain perspective on the strategies that you can adopt, right? So the self-assessment toolkit, right, is a self-assessment to strengthen your capacity. So what the toolkit can help you is to assess your growth potential, identify the areas of implementation, right, to meet the what you can grow in, right, and what are the areas of improvement in terms of your growth potential, so that your strategy could be more targeted. Okay, so it's back to the 7 aspect, right? So there are certain numbers of criteria for each of these key ingredient. So in youth program, there are 5 criteria. Okay, so I've listed out the 5 criteria here. So I won't go through them in details, but I think what I'm trying to surface here is the growth assessment toolkit, which is in line with the GSET criteria, are some of the aspects that you want to consider to help you grow, right? So I was mentioning there are 5 aspects on this, right? All right, and then that will bring us close to the end of what I want to share, right? So now back to the 3 questions, right? What is your answer to the following? Can you answer them? What is the youth program? How to effectively implement program to ensure membership retention, as well as to attract young people, and how important is the ingredient contributing to the growth, right? So just to recap, right? In youth program, we are always thinking about the what, the why, and the how. Okay, and then how to effectively implement program to ensure membership retention, right? If you recall this slide, if young people feel that scouting offers them positive challenges and opportunity, they will stay, right? If they recognize scouting's contribution, they will come. So it's about meeting young people's needs, they will come. And when we meet the young people's want, they will stay, right? And how important is it for youth program to growth, right? So we have already discussed that youth program is an ingredient for growth, and from WOSM's perspective, you can see the one in orange is the biggest contributing factor to attraction and retention of your members. right? So hopefully with that will answer the 3 questions, and then you will have some broad ideas on how to go about doing it. Of course, I think this is a very short session, okay? But I'll encourage you to look deeper into the youth program policy as well as the growth toolkit, right? So that you can make use of all these tools for your growth strategy. There are some other considerations here that I would like to share based on our experience when we are doing our growth strategy and youth program, right? One thing that we need to consider is it must be a whole of NSO approach. It should not be just a youth program initiative or ARS initiative or a certain department, right? The most effective way to go about doing it is the whole NSO must move together. The other aspect is how to make use of WOSM resources. There are tons of resources available from WOSM, right? So all the sharing I had today are all drawn from WOSM resources. So make use of them, right? The other one is adopt the framework in full, right? Any method is only effective when it's implemented in full, right? If you just pick bits and pieces of it, then chances are it may not see the full effect. So you need to adopt the framework in full and adapt to your context and needs. All of the WOSM framework, there are elements that we need to be faithful to, as well as there are elements that you need to consider as an NSO, how they can be more effective for you. Okay, right, number 4, build a network, right? Share your experience, exchange ideas, learn from one another, right? So when you talk to other people, when you share your joy and your pain, you learn from one another, and then you will discover that you will find solutions, you will find best practices among yourself. And then the other thing to consider is WOSM services is there to support you, right? So as an NSO, if there are certain area that you find that you have certain difficulties in, right, you can consider the APR support office and then to get some support from WOSM services. Okay, so that's very much, these are the references, right? This is what I have for you today. I'm not sure whether if I've exceeded the time, right? So thank you very much. And at this moment, right, I'm not sure we have time for questions.
Swamiji, Madhu.
Sir, I'm online, sir.
Yeah, so if you think that there are few hands which are coming up, so just in case if you think people can stay, we can have two choices. We can have one choice that those who want to leave, if they are in a hurry, then we let them leave. And those who wanted to stay and then have question answers, we can give them opportunity to have question answers. I leave it to you.
Sir, if some questions are coming, we will otherwise type and give if those who leave, no problem. Because people sometimes may be moving out for offices or going out of offices now. No problem.
So we will stay for about 10-15 minutes to answer the questions, if there are any. Eric, is that fine with you?
Sure, I'll be more than happy.
Yeah, okay. So, Swamiji, you will moderate the questions?
Sir, I'm there, sir, online only. If the questions coming is, as you had mentioned that there are 7 ingredients for growth, isn't environment important and should be one of the ingredients?
Okay. Yes, I will agree that the environment it should be part of the consideration, but maybe because I've moved through the elements quite quickly, right? So if you recall, one of the elements is a strong organization, right? So in fact, that is a internal environment that we need to consider, right? So I will say that environment is important. Internal and external environment is important, and that has been considered, okay? But although it was not explicitly mentioned as environment as an ingredient, but I think it was integrated in the rest of the elements. So you are right there that consideration of the environment is important.
Thank you, Eric. Very well said. Just to supplement, Eric, as you have heard that there is an ingredient called strong organization, uh, which is one of the ingredient out of the 7 for growth. And that covers your internal, external environment, good governance in the organization, and many other. So I think, Harun, that is what I believe you're asking for. So wait for the module coming up in a few days' time on a strong organization. Don't forget to join that. You will have more answers on that. I think in the chat box, there are quite a lot. There is another question coming from Gaddapati Srinivas. Swamiji, you want to answer this or you want me to answer this question?
Sir, this is basically not related to youth program. This comes in the good governance. So we will deal when good governance. We will speak about incentives and how things to take up.
Great, but very quick answer to Mr. Gaddar.
Yeah, you can, sir, please.
Yeah, that try to run scouting in a way of scouting. I fully understand that there needs to be good motivation, good recognitions for scouting to grow and prosper. However, if instead of incentives by the government in terms of marks, in terms of recruitment, then you will not be getting the people and the parents who really wants their young people to global active citizens. Those then they will come to grab the marks. They will come in the interest of some kind of greed in materialism or something else, but they will not come to you because they wanted to really learn something for life. So I think this is the shift that Bharat Scouts and Guides have to make, that your youth program should be so strong. Its implementation should be so strong that people should love to come here. For me, giving an answer is simple. Why young people go on WhatsApp? What kind of recognition do they get there? Why do young people go to pubs and goes to disco and goes to, what kind of recognition do they get? They get extra marks for that? No, because they have fun and enjoyment there. That's why they go. They love it. And that's what Eric was saying. Relevant to the needs of young people. If you can provide something what is needed, what they enjoy, they will come to you. And if you, when they come to you, you give them what they want, they will stay with you. So basically, if you are going to give them the other kind of privileges, that is timing, and that's not the purpose and mission of the Scout movement. So basically, you should look into that how best you can make your youth program attractive so that people come to scouting to enjoy scouting, not to get something out of scouting other than their personal development. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. We will just look for if there's any more questions. Otherwise, we'll ask for any remarks from Param, if Param has any remarks. Param?
Yes, thank you. Basically, I think it was a good session. Eric covered completely from A to Z on youth program, and I think he managed to link it to growth. So, and the questions which are coming so far, I think some of it is more towards a strong organization, which will be on Friday, I believe. So we'll answer more in detail there. That's about it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Param. Friends, as we already crossed 2 hours 20 minutes, I think most of you are getting late. If you have any further questions, feel free to drop your questions to the email address what you all know, admin@bsgindia.org. We'll be able to get back to you with the answers. We'll share it with Eric and try to answer those questions. Thank you very much, Eric, for your time and a wonderful input session. It was excellent. And thank you, Angchen, for being in this webinar and helping us out. Dear friends, for you all, the next webinar will be on communication. And this webinar will be on the 24th of June, same time, 5 to 7. So we'll send you the invites. Once you are done with this webinar and click the leave button, you'll find the registration page for the next webinar. You can register yourself. We will share the PowerPoint presentation of this webinar to your registered email IDs. Thank you very much. And I request Swami sir for the final remarks.
Thank you very much. Our International Commissioner, Dr. Jesse Mohanty, was joining us in the beginning, and as he has to leave in between, on behalf of him and the staff of National Headquarters, first of all, we would like to thank our experts for a very powerful session, which was supported by an informative presentation. The people, those who are attending this, will be highly benefited from this. And we also hope that few questions which came at the end will go out of their minds once they review the toolkit and get to how the youth program needs to be seen than how it is now being delivered. So we thank the WOSM Support Services, the Asia Pacific Support Center, and all the panelists for being of highly useful to the members attending these webinars. Though we designed it for few membership coordinators at the state level, this has been well received by the trainers, state level office bearers, and even unit leaders contributing to the youth program. So we thank all the state associations also for making full use of these webinars being presented with the support of WOSM Asia Pacific region. We thank everyone. Look forward to meet you in the next series of webinars on adult in scouting, and further 5 more sessions related to growth and its contributing elements. Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thank you, Eric, for a great session. Thank you very much. I learned a lot today.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye, everyone.
Bye,
Bye.
everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you, Angchen.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Carol.
Thank you.
All the attendees now may leave.
Thank you.